This is a job I can get behind. On Capitol Hill, someone sitting at a desk in the Dirksen building, scrolling through decorative borders. Maybe little heart emojis. Maybe add a lined paper texture. Really get into it. And yes, this person probably used AI, but the image of a congressional staffer hunched over, agonizing over which heart graphic looked better is way funnier in my head. Because yes, a United States senator released a 1,141-page federal document package, and he laid out the front pages to look like a middle school girl's diary. And that is what the oversight function of the United States Senate produced, 1,100 pages, plus another 136 pages of correspondence about awards and prize money, and they framed it as Dear Diary. And this all came from Rand Paul, who looks like an alpaca that was cursed to live as a human after spitting at too many people, put out what he calls Tony's diary package. And he dropped it just days before Anthony Fauci testifies in front of him, which is Wednesday morning. And you see what he's doing here. He's poisoning the well, getting the clips out, walking into the hearing with the narrative already built. The press, they're just going to help you get momentum on your side, and your witness, in this case Fauci, would be on his heels before he even walks in the building. And frankly, I guess that's politics, gamesmanship or something, and I have seen worse. But the problem, when looking through these documents, the 1,100 pages, is what is actually in it. Because I read all the summaries, I read the coverage, The Guardian, The Hill, Newsweek, Fox, Daily Caller, the people cheering him, the people jeering, and I have skimmed through all 1,100 pages. And I kept waiting for, the thing, the smoking gun, the moment where the mask comes off, see what I did there, and you see the real villain. And what I found instead was a guy who wrote down that he was on TV a lot. I mean, frankly, the marquee revelation here comes from May 21st, 2020, where Fauci writes that a big front page article about him appeared in the Washington Post. And it was flattering, and that the situation with his national and international fame is explosive and really unimaginable. He writes that it's not hyperbole to say that he's the most famous and talked about person in the country. That's the bombshell. That's the thing that proves Rand Paul was somehow right about COVID. Look, if you read it, was Fauci's fawning over himself maybe a little arrogant? Sure. Was it a little much? Probably. But is it also kind of completely true? I mean, think back to May of 2020. Fauci was the most talked about person in the country. There were bobbleheads and beers named after him. He did an Instagram Live with Steph Curry. He was invited to be on Dancing with the Stars. Secret Service agents stopped checking his badge because they knew his face. So he didn't make the fame part up. He simply walked out of his office one day and it happened to him. And this man, in his late 70s, working 18-hour days in the middle of the worst public health emergency in a century, wrote in his private journal that this was weird and overwhelming and maybe a little bit flattering. So because of that, let's lock him up. He's evil. And look, I need to be fair here because I don't do the thing that where I pretend that the other side isn't right about a few morsels. Because there are pieces of harder material in the release. Entries from late January and February of 2020, where scientists on a call raised the possibility that the virus looked constructed, that the site was strange, that it might not be natural. And so Paul's argument is that Fauci privately entertained that while publicly calling that question settled. It's a real argument, and that deserves a real answer, and Fauci is going to have to give one on Wednesday, under oath. But that's not a new argument. It's existed for a while. It existed long before this diary release. Rand Paul has been making that same point for 5 years. It didn't require 1,000 pages of a man's private journal, and it certainly didn't require the trapper-keeper graphics. Though personally, how can you make that cover page and not go full-on Lisa Franks, dolphins and hearts? I mean, it's not hard. But look, what did this release actually get us? Because 6 years out from the start of all of this, what's the one thing we actually got wrong about COVID, that nobody on your side wants to admit. Not the other side, yours. For me, I think our side's communication was sloppy. I think having leaders that often ignored their own guidelines really damaged public trust. And frankly, I think people underestimated the psychological toll that isolation would have on people, especially in our schools. Now, I'm not saying I had a solution to that, but I don't think we handled it particularly well. What do you think? Looking back, drop me a comment, tell me what you think there. And look, really, what this diary is actually about is not Anthony Fauci at all. Because the entries in this diary keep circling back to one thing: Fauci's relationship with Donald Trump. Fauci writing that Donald Trump seems to be enamored with him, even though he's taking the spotlight away from him. Fauci describes it as a very unique and interesting relationship. You almost may read that it's warm. He records down that in a Situation Room meeting, Trump introduced Fauci to the room as, quote, really a famous guy, one of the smartest and most outstanding people he knows. And then 2 days after the Washington Post flattery piece, Fauci writes that the White House is very upset that he's being profiled because it looks like he's outshining the president. And yep, we found it. That's it. Right there, that is your smoking gun. That's the thing, the whole story, the whole point in one sentence. The President of the United States, in the middle of a pandemic that would eventually kill more than 1 million Americans, was essentially keeping score on press coverage. And to be clear, let's think about what Fauci was actually navigating here. He was trying to run a scientific response inside an administration where the president was promoting horse dewormer to a base that took it seriously. While his job was to deliver public health guidance and his boss was workshopping livestock medication on national television. And then his boss got mad that the press liked him better. And now, 6 years later, we are all being asked by Rand Paul to be outraged that Dr. Fauci noticed that he was famous. So he's going to be dragged before the Senate in part because he wrote in a notebook that people were paying attention to him and Donald Trump couldn't stand it. And like I said, I'm not saying Fauci is a saint. He liked the attention. He said so in his own writings, which is frankly more honesty than anyone we've gotten that's currently in anything related to health in our government. The Department of Health and Human Services. Good Lord, look at that. But Fauci is not Dr. Evil. And in this 1,100 pages, I saw no mentions of ill-tempered sea bass. Fauci is simply a bureaucrat who got famous during the most famous emergency of our lifetimes and then wrote about it in a book that nobody was supposed to read. And normally, I might be able to shrug this off if the obsession stopped at Fauci. But it doesn't. Because while a Senate committee spends 1,100 pages relitigating 2020, look at what's happening 6 years later. Measles, 2,300 cases confirmed by the CDC this year as of last week. That's already past the total for all of last year. And last year was already the worst in more than 3 decades, the highest number since 1991. 45 states, 93% of the people who got sick were unvaccinated. Half of the cases are kids and young adults between 5 and 19. Hell, my state, Florida, ranks 5th in the country, 141 cases. Last year we had 8. 8 compared to 141. While our Surgeon General, Joseph Ladapo, spent last year standing next to Ron DeSantis vowing to end every vaccine mandate in this state. But he'll also tell you that the vaccine works, but that nobody should have to get it at the same time with a straight face. Meanwhile, your CDC has no permanent director, there's no Surgeon General, and the guy running HHS spent the early part of this outbreak downplaying it. We are so doomed, and they're going to pick apart a diary on Capitol Hill. So do me a favor, hit that notification bell because Fauci testifies on Wednesday morning, and I'm going to be watching every second of it, especially the parts that the corporate networks will gloss over.